What's going on, everyone? Welcome to a Monday edition of Back Your Play B by P with Q. Rich Quinones here. Lloyd Vance, again, second portion of our show on this Monday. Kind enough to join us, NFL Insider, host of Lloyd Vance's Insider Football 1029 The Game, and of course, Broad Street South on X at Lloyd Vance. As we go around the league, we talked a little bit about some of the movement with some of these coordinators and these head coaches now within the games. And let's start really with what transpired on Thanksgiving, and then we'll move on to this weekend's past actions. We talked a little bit about Washington making a change, Dallas, big performance. The Lions, I thought, here you go, in a spot. This is why you can prove to everyone that you want to maintain that relationship on Thanksgiving, right, for the last 30, 40, 50-something years. They spit the bit against the Green Bay Packers, and then the 49ers just quietly going about their business. I thought the biggest takeaway for me was Green Bay on the road against the Lions. I thought that was their moment to kind of shine on national TV and change the narrative of, hey, we've arrived. We're not the same old Lions, and they were not able to do that.
Yeah, Scoot, this was supposed to be the Lions' big coming out party on national television, and everybody's watching, all eyes on them. And the Packers said, "We're here to play," and I was surprised, Q. Actually, the Packers have been. There have been times in the season where I watched them, and they're a very sloppy team. Particularly their quarterback Jordan
Yep.
Love has had some very bad performances, but he came out and he established everything right off the bat.
Oh,
One
yeah.
of the first plays of the game, he goes down the field and he throws it to Christian Watson, who's also been highly underachieving this season, and that was a big play and set the tone for the game. So Love ends up 22 or 32, 268 yards, no interceptions, and he had 3 TD passes. And then they got Watson involved with in terms of targets. He had over 8 targets, and he had 5 catches for 94 yards and a TD. So this team is hungry, and they showed they still want to fight for that sixth, that seventh playoff spot at 5-6 right now. The Packers can still get back in the race. They have a lot of talent on that team. They're starting to get a little healthy. They were able to perform without Jones, and they're good. Aaron Jones back soon. So, yeah, to me, that game was all about the Lions not stepping up and the Packers doing
Yeah.
just that.
And the 49ers taking care of business. We know Dallas is going to wax Washington. I mean, again, if you looked at it from a line standpoint, you had some good opportunities kind of cash in if you want Thursday. The 49ers just taking care of business. Right now, opening line looks like 1.5, 2 against the Philadelphia Eagles. We'll talk more about that game later in the week. Black Friday, man. I mean, it, only the Jets, right? I posted it on X, like, what's more embarrassing, the butt fumble or a Hail Mary return for a touchdown, 99? I mean, you cannot make this. That was a game, again, if you listen to us earlier in the week, you were cashing. I mean, it was a no-brainer. This offense stinks. It's broken. And I'll say this, not so much about the game. This whole notion that Aaron Rodgers is planning to come back in a couple more weeks, to me, what's the reason? Like, risk to reward here. I think it's extremely selfish of Aaron Rodgers because this team's not going anywhere. So you're going to come out to play 2-3 games just to show the rest of the NFL world that you can come back. And now there's conspiracy theorists saying, you know what, it's really not a torn Achilles. Like, again, if this is such a magical potion and formula, share it with us. Like, why is this top secret? Why is this basically like, the Ark of the Covenant and Raiders of the, we can't open it. We don't want to know what's coming, what's in the box. Like, share with the rest of us so we can know with some of these athletes tearing their ACLs, but that's a story for another day. I think it's ridiculously selfish. Robert Saleh has lost his team. Zach Wilson stinks. He cannot play. This defense is not an all-time great. They're a very suspect defense. They quit the other day. The GM, Joe Douglas, has had more misses than hits. And then I got to listen to Rodgers crap. Just shut up already. Enough. Like, there's no point for him coming back other than, I'm selfish. I want to shut people up and show you that I can come back. What happens if he tears his ACL again? I mean, I'm sorry. No doctor in their right mind is going to medically clear this guy.
Yeah, this whole thing with the Achilles is he's not coming back, Q. And this is Rodgers just wanting the attention to focus on him. We talk about the Jets and where they are at this point in their season. They're 4-7. they're well behind all the other teams in the playoff race. They have no chance. And this franchise's season was built on fool's gold. It was
Mhm.
Aaron Rodgers and his crew coming there, and they were going to get it done. They were going to bring the traveling show to New York, and everything was going to change. And the Jets were finally going to make the playoffs for the first time since 2013. Well, they're the same old Jets, and the owner Woody Johnson has got to be sitting there looking at this and saying, you know what, change is coming, and I'm not even sure Rodgers is going to come back next season because all the guys that he brought with him, all his crew, uh, the offensive tackle that's
Lazard.
underperforming.
Yep.
Yeah, you have Cobb, Lazard,
Yep.
all these former Packers, even Nathaniel Hackett, his guru of an offensive coordinator he brought over is not getting the job done. And as you said, it's all probably going to fall on Robert Salah and that staff as they're going to probably clean house there, and Joe Douglas, who brought in some pieces in terms of the defense, but he's had way too many misses. Particularly Mekhi Becton, who was his cornerstone draft pick, he cannot stay healthy on that offensive line.
And Zach
And
Wilson.
yeah, Zach Wilson as well. They're probably going to clean house all these guys. And it was in terms of the game, it was just ugly. The NFL, they probably should have swapped that game out. It was an ugly watch. The Miami didn't play particularly well, but it was like a cat with a mouse the whole time. They just knew they were going to win the game, and they were like,
100%.
all right, let's just get out of here and get this W. And we've talked about the inefficiencies of the Dolphins, how they haven't beat any good teams, and they just beat up on a poor Jets team, and it had to be a home game, unfortunate for all those fans that were at MetLife Stadium.
Yeah, like I said, we'll talk a lot more about the Jets going forward. You had the Falcons getting a nice win over the Saints. Still don't have confidence in that quarterback. And then I thought, a nice win for the Steelers. I'm torn because I don't think they're very good. Now, do we find it interesting that they fire the offensive coordinator and then they rack up 421 yards? They did beat a Cincinnati team without Joe Burrow. Cincinnati's pretty much done. They needed that game. The Steelers now put themselves in real prime position, right? Even though Cleveland stubbed their toe shockingly against Denver. Now you look at Baltimore and Pittsburgh in the AFC North. They're going to probably solidify. Well, they will solidify playoff spots. But, the Steelers, it almost reminds me, this Steelers team, aside from the quarterback, it reminds me of the 2016 McAdoo Giants because they won ugly, low-scoring games with their defense. They didn't put up the gaudy numbers, and they were able to get to the playoffs. They lost a wild card game against Green Bay, but I'm not overly impressed with Pittsburgh, but they are 7-4.
Yes, Kuhn. And everybody's going to point to Mike Tomlin's never had a losing season, and what a great job he's done. And he has with this unit because when you watch them, the offense is just struggling. They do have some pieces, but it all revolves around Kenny Pickett, and he's a quarterback that's just you can see that he's a lower tier guy. They drafted him in the first round, a year that was kind of devoid of quarterbacks, and he's just not making plays. And they have a few receivers that can get it done, but I really do like what they're doing with Warren. And it was good that they finally got 400 yards of offense for like the first time in like 3-4 years. And this was our opportunity, a good solid win for them, beating the Bengals 16-10. And now they've jumped in a race. And as you said, they're going to be a team that's kind of dangerous in the playoffs because that defense can get after
Mm-hmm.
people, particularly Watt and Highsmith, and they're getting back Micah Fitzpatrick at the safety position. He didn't play in this one, so dangerous defensively. But the Steelers, as you said, a tough watch offensively. Good form for them. They move on. It may come down to they play the Baltimore Ravens in Baltimore week 18.
It's good scheduling there. Titans over the Panthers. We talked a little bit about before. The Colts over the Bucks. I thought this is a game where maybe the Bucks can kind of pull it out, and then quietly, you look at Jonathan Taylor. Obviously, Colts fans are happy to have him back. Scores 2 touchdowns. That run defense, just they overpower Tampa Bay's run defense. The Colts all of a sudden don't look now. They're a 6-5 team, and what stood out to me was the balance of attack. Now they weren't really efficient on third down, just 2 of 11, but they had, if I pull it up real quick, they had 12 rushing first downs. Okay. They did very well on fourth down. They were able to pass the ball very well. Gardner Minshew, how many teams would probably like this guy, even though he's a backup as a starting quarterback in the NFL? He's played really well in light of the situation with Richardson's going down. He put up some really nice numbers yesterday, and albeit, he had the one interception, but he didn't take a ton of sacks. The numbers were there, and they were able to run for about $155.
Yes, Q, and with the Houston Texans stubbing their toe and losing to Jacksonville in heartbreaking fashion, it
Yep.
opens the door for the Colts. They're both now 6-5, and if the playoffs start today, the Colts will be the seventh seed. So, very good story. And on top of what you were saying in terms of Shane Steichen rallying this team after Richardson goes down, and Minshew is a professional quarterback. He's never going to be a frontline star or anything, but typically he's going to take care of the football, get the ball to Pittman, and then hand it off to Taylor. You see Taylor is finally starting to round into shape. Zach Moss is kind of taking a back seat on his team, and they're going to run behind Quentin Nelson, one of the best players on terms of offensive line behind him. And that defense, not a lot of big names on that defense, but they can get after teams, and they always get the timely turnover. So good win for the Colts. When you talk about the Bucs, I think the Bucs are kind of sliding back. We talked about that NFC South.
Yep.
There are just a lot of bad teams there. They may be able to jump in that division race, but the Bucs, there's just not a lot there. And Baker Mayfield, we're starting to see who he really is a quarterback.
Let's jump to that Jacksonville Texans game because I love CJ Stroud. I like what Ryans is doing. Some very questionable officiating in that game as well. I did not like the last series offensively. I mean, listen, I told you, I thought Trevor Lawrence in Jacksonville were going to be one of my dark horses. I took a flyer on him as MVP. He threw for close to 400 yards yesterday. Amendola is trying to nail a 54-yarder with the doink right there. That's a tough loss for the Texans because that's a game they had, man. They had a couple drops, they had a couple bad penalties, and I mentioned a couple very suspect officiating plays, and I'll leave it at that. But I think that win also speaks to the toughness of Jacksonville going forward.
Well, Jacksonville's doing a nice job, and I'm sure we're going to talk about the other Josh Allen in a minute, but the Josh Allen that's playing for the Jacksonville Jaguars, their defensive end, he is
Yep.
playing at a high level, getting after the quarterback, doing a great job. CJ Stroud was not that comfortable in the pocket. They always had constant pressure on him, particularly on third downs. You saw that Jacksonville was able to get off the field, and they limited a lot of those explosive plays that we'd seen from the Texans over the last couple of weeks. So I do agree with you. Very good win for them. You wonder if D'Amico Ryans and Slowick, who's their offensive coordinator, wish they on that 4th and 12 rather than kick that long field goal with Amendola, who's never made a 50-yarder.
Yep. Yep.
If they kind of went for it and trying to get a little closer, but it was a good kick. I knew he was going to miss it though. It just was a big spot for a young kicker, and unfortunately, it hits the crossbar of all things. Look, it was going right down the middle. But Jacksonville now is 8-3, and surprisingly, Q, the AFC is kind of wide open at the top, and they are competing for that top spot. They may be able to get home field if the Ravens, who kind of were sloppy last night in a win, kind of stub their toe. And we see Kansas City, another team who's winning, but there are question marks there. So Jacksonville's in the mix. They're the number 3 seed, and their schedule's kind of favorable. They have Cincinnati. They're at Cleveland. They play Baltimore in a big game. They have Tampa Bay, and we talked about them earlier. Carolina, a very good team, and they finished the season at Tennessee, who also has a losing record. So, they may have a shot.
Yeah, and a couple things. Some of the play calling could have bit Doug Peterson in the ass because they had 10 seconds left in a half. Lawrence found Kirk for about a 60-yarder, pushed out of bounds into one with a second left. They elect to try to run ETN as opposed to kick the field goal. He got stuffed. So, but they are 6-0 on the road, and they showed some moxie. That's a really nice win for them in a division, as you mentioned, where they've created some separation. You probably got to start to now put Doug Peterson in the conversation also for Coach of the Year. Do you not?
Yes, and WP is a guy, he's quiet, he goes about his business, and they built a very nice team there. Walker on defense, their high draft pick, he's starting to play well as too, and offensively, you got to like what Lawrence is doing. ATN's running the ball. I know he got stuffed on that play, but They have Kirk. They've really gotten Ridley involved. He's becoming their receiver number one. He's making big plays for them. And they've even gotten Evan Ingram and that offensive line that was kind of beat up over the years to start playing well as well, too. So this team, they're going to be a fun watch. And the key is obviously Trevor Lawrence. He finally got on track after not having a touchdown pass for quite a number of weeks.
In a Monday edition of BYP, Rich Quinones here. Lloyd Vance kind enough to join us. As always, we're presented by our wonderful friends over at BetterHelp. Let me take a moment and tell everyone out there about this amazing partnership with BYP. Listen, life can be beyond overwhelming. Work, family, pursuing the passions, working hard, 9 to 5, double dipping, working 2 jobs. Trust me, we know about it. Holidays are still right around the corner with Christmas. Sometimes you feel a little overwhelmed and you just might need someone to talk with and to back your play when it comes to taking care of yourself and your mental well-being. If you're thinking about starting therapy, then please give BetterHelp a try. Flexible with online sessions, they will work around your schedule. All you have to do is go to betterhelp.com/RichQ. You get 10% off your first month. That's betterhelp.com/RichQ. All right, so you talk about, again, some of the tank stuff that is really just have gotten on my friggin' nerves. So I don't want to spend too much time on the game itself, but the Giants get the win. DeVito's not turning the ball over. They had the one little blunder, the bad handoff. They probably should have won that game easily by 10. Mac Jones gets benched again for New England. It's an ugly game. Missed field goal late. Giants hang on. We love the under. We told you to cash in 10-7. Jones turns it over. Zappe turns it over to the hoodie. Looks like he's getting ready to go. Here's my thought. I'm here. We can spin narratives. We can lay it out however we want. But this really, it's got to end this conversation, because all I hear is from some of these giant beat reporters and some of the talking heads on radio in New York is tank, you're ruining your draft position. You're ruining your draft position. Can we shut the frig up about that? Because when I posed a question, explain to me, what's your definition of tanking? Because a couple weeks ago, this team was getting waxed by the Raiders and the Cowboys and Miami and Seattle and the 49ers and the Cowboys again. And everyone was talking about bringing Belichick. The head coach is on the hot seat. The GM's on the hot seat. You got to blow it up. Forget about the quarterback. Get rid of the running back. You have a couple defensive players. Now it's, well, they're playing hard because the head coach has rallied them. But yet people, fans, the New York sports fan, the Giant fan is not a stupid fan. But some of them sound, and I'm allowed to speak for them because I represent them. Some of them sound like idiots and jackasses because you want the head coach gone. You want your draft status where there's no guarantee you're going to get a hit, or you want to win a couple football games. So here's my issue with this, and then I want you to chime in, please. When I present it to people, define tanking, you've got players out there like an undrafted free agent and Tommy DeVito who wants to throw the football. Do you think this kid wanted to hand off 35 friggin' times against the Jets? No. You know why? Because this is his one crack at the NFL. So he wants to perform well. You have young wide receivers. You have KT, Thibodeau on the defensive end that maybe wants to hit incentives. You got Saquon that might be playing for another team, so he's not going to run hard. People aren't going to tackle. They're not going to catch. They're not going to run routes. Explain to me this bullshit when people friggin' sit there and say, you're ruining your draft status. Stop winning games. What do they want the team and the players to do? You and I have been in locker rooms for the past 20 years. Can you imagine us going into a locker room saying, hey, by the way, Thibodeau or Daniel Jones or Fletcher Cox or Brandon Graham or Jalen Hurts, why don't you guys just roll over? Why even bother to show up? Lose a couple games so it'll help you when it comes to April. It makes no sense. Can we squash and stop the nonsense of tanking, please?
And I love your passion there because it's true, because fans are fanatical. They're not in the locker room. These guys are in there. They want to fight. They all are professionals. They have pride. You know what I mean? And you always have to remember this. Parity has limited the rate. There's a thin line between the average teams and the bad teams. So, yes, the Giants are probably lower down on the spectrum. They're not up there in upper tier teams, but they can beat an average football team on any given Sunday. And they're going to go out there and they're going to go out there and play hard. Um, they all want to put tape out there for all the other teams,
That's
as
my
you're
whole
saying.
point.
If they're going to tear it down and they're all going to be someplace else, they want to put their best foot forward. And that's what it's all about. That's what being a professional is
Yeah,
all about,
but Lloyd, when you hear like when I got to listen to talking heads and I have to listen to guys that are covering the team write and push these narratives where you're ruining draft status, I ask a simple question and it can't be answered. Define tanking. What do you want them to do? Do you want Saquon to fumble every time he touches the ball? Do you want guys to miss blocks and assignments and not tackle and have it on film? These guys have pride. This is their livelihood. Some of these guys maybe have incentives and clauses in their contract. You hit 10 sacks, you go over 1,000 yards, you catch 100 balls. Well, what do you think? At the end of the day, they're going to dog it? Why? Because you think come April, 10 years from now, we're going to talk about a couple wins. It's the narrative that people push. They can make it any way they want. And I remember a couple years ago, they beat Washington the last game of the season. And everyone's like, oh my God. Is there a guarantee that any of these quarterbacks coming out are going to be can't miss? Now, I get it. Joe Shane said earlier today, they're probably going to have to look at quarterbacks in some capacity in the offseason, whether it's a draft or free agents. That's because Daniel Jones is hurt. But I just, again, when I throw the question out there, no one ever has an accurate answer. Like, define tanking for me. Do you really think these guys want to go out and put themselves in harm's way? There's a difference between a business decision in December, where you're thinking about vacation in the Caribbean and golfing with your buddies, then talking about October, late October, November, guys flat out quitting. Because when you do that, coaches get fired, coordinators get fired, guys get cut, guys get released. So again, I keep posing this question, but no one seems to answer it. Like, what is tanking in the NFL?
Yeah, there is no tanking. And to the teams that have underachieved and 1-win season, no-win season. I remember I talked to a guy. He was on that Tampa Bay team that didn't win a game. It was 0-14. They used to have the record, and those guys were trying. They were just an expansion team. They didn't have the horses. You know what I mean? And as we said, most of these guys playing in the NFL now, they're elite players. They have achieved at a high level in high school, in college, and now they've made the ultimate, which is National Football League. And a lot of them, their careers are 3 years. So you're telling me that a guy that may only have 3 years to his career is going to not try and try to lose games? They don't care about next season. You know what I mean? And as you said, there's no guarantee. We keep seeing all these bonus baby quarterbacks that are drafted underachieve. The new saviors of a team, they turned out to be, a big rock that drags a team down to the bottom of the ocean. I mean, look at Darnold. They thought he was going to be the man and get it done. That I could go on and on. Carson Wentz here
It's
in
just the
Philadelphia.
fans. It's the they're so narrow minded they're so narrow minded when it comes to this, because again, I get it. There's a big difference. Second, third, sixth, seventh. You trade down, you trade up. I understand all of that. I really do. But a kid like DeVito, he's trying to carve out a career in the NFL, maybe as a backup for 4, 5, 6 years and make some money. Guys that are unrestricted free agents, or maybe the last year in their contract, a Saquon, do you think Waller wants to be hurt, or Andrew Thomas, one of the best tackles in football, doesn't want to play, or Dexter Lawrence, who probably has incentives, or Thibodeau, who's got incentives? They're not going to go out and play. It just, and I don't believe all these statements can be true. I don't believe that. I just think when fans look at it and you got talking heads that are like, you're ruining your draft status, explain that to me. Because if you go in a locker room, the head coach does not want to lose football games. That equals being fired, which equals turnover, which equals horrible play again. They're going to run it back with Daniel Jones. They're going to get a viable option as a backup. They're probably going to draft a lineman, and they go from there. Like, you've just got to accept it. And by the way, Larry Ball, who played for that 76 Bucks team, was also on that undefeated Dolphins team. And he told me at the time when I interviewed him, guys still played hard. They realized they had no chance of hell. And I think he's one of maybe three in the history of the NFL to go to a winless team or to play for an undefeated team to go to a winless team. But your point is they have pride. It's just something that it just bugs me because it never makes sense when someone says, stop winning. You think Brian Dable's sitting there today? Man, we should have lost. I'm hearing these reports. The kicker kind of shanked it. Belichick probably didn't want to win the game. Really? I mean, is this where we're at? So, in any event, I had to just kind of vent and get that out there. Rams with a good win over the Cardinals. How about Denver? I mean, I have to apologize. I thought Peyton was back ass. Listen. I'm gonna have to apologize to Russ. He marinated. He didn't fully cook yesterday, but this could have went south pretty fast. Denver, big win. I liked them outright against Cleveland, 29-12, and all of a sudden, Bronco ball, whatever the hell he says, giddy up, let's ride, 6-5. And Russell Wilson has played well this year.
Yeah, Q5 straight wins, and it's hit him. It's a defense that was there. This defense that we laughed about getting 70 hung on them. Now this group under Vance Joseph, they have some teeth. They're getting after the quarterback. You got Surtain and the rest of those guys in the back end making plays. And you're right. There's something that's come along. Maybe Sean Payton isn't such a bad coach after all. And a lot of flowers and apology got to come their way. But we'll wait and see how the season turns out. They're 6-5 after those 5 straight wins I talk about. They're right behind the Colts. They're losing that 7th spot on a tiebreaker, but this is a team that's going to be fun to watch down the stretch. And we talked about before the season all those receivers that they had, and those guys are really starting to make plays for Russell Wilson. And it's going to be fun to see if they can keep moving forward. We know they beat Denver already. They already beat KC earlier this season, so fun team to watch.
I was about to say, in this stretch, they've had 1, 2, 3, 4 games at home. They have to go on the road 3 straight. Texans, the Chargers, and Detroit. They close out against New England, the Chargers, on the road against the Raiders. Now, how about the Raiders maybe not playing for anything, try to be spoiler, or maybe the Raiders are playing for something, even though they lost to Kansas City, with an opportunity to make the playoffs. I mean, it's so congested in that AFC, and then the NFC, you got 3 or 4 really good top heavy teams. I want to get into the game, the game of the weekend, maybe even the game of the year in the NFL. Buffalo and the Philadelphia Eagles, Buffalo Bills and the Philadelphia Eagles. Eagles win it in overtime. So here's a couple things. They win at 37-34. It was a crazy game. Let's start with the bad and the elephant in the room that people are going to crush me for saying. How can you not sit there and say the officials did not have a hand in this game? And I say this to a lot of my Eagles brethren, family, friends. You have family and friends that watch the show, have listened to you, join me for years on the radio. They're probably going to text you and call you after this. I don't ever want to friggin' hear the fan base bitch, whine, and cry again about officiating. I don't, because they got another game gift wrapped to them with some of these egregious miscalls and calls on Buffalo. I mean, it was amazing. 8 flags in the first quarter. Hankies were flying all over the place. It was horrible to watch. It killed the flow of the game. And then you get the non-horse collar, and then they touch Allen and he dives, and you get the flag. You don't get pass interference on Diggs. Now, granted, all that being said, Buffalo had opportunities to put this game away. They missed 2 field goals. Cook had an opportunity for an easy touchdown reception. Allen had to pick. The play in overtime, we'll get into that. But how do you not sit there and say this game was absolutely poorly officiated? And like, just humble yourself, Eagles fans. Like, you got a gift yesterday. You showed moxie. You showed heart. Now you're shaking you because you're afraid your phone's going to blow up after we post this.
I noticed. For years, I heard Eagles fans saying, "Oh, they don't like us. They don't like us. They're always against us. The calls go to Dallas." and Troy Aikman and all the guys. Well, it's slanted the Eagles' direction. We saw that in the Dolphins game where what was it, 10 penalties, the Dolphins, none for the Eagles.
11
And,
yesterday to 4.
yeah,
To 4
yeah.
for
And
Philly.
there were a couple situations like, how did they not see that? In particularly, that Diggs interference was right in front. And it was so
Oh,
close
on
that you could
Slay.
see the official's number. He was number 77. And he's standing right there. You're like, how did he not see him get tackled there? But, you know, the football gods, it always seems to work out, Q. So the flags may be flying the Eagles' way, but you never know. In a big situation, there fans are always going to cry like in the Super Bowl and say, "Oh, that wasn't holding," but that turned the big play in the Super Bowl last year. But yeah, definitely, I was like, wow, there were a couple head shaking moments in this game. I'll just put it that
Just
way.
be consistent. Like the horse collar, and I know Steratore came out on Twitter on X, but just the visual, the optics, they always throw that flag. And then you get the ticky tack touch on Allen, who sold it, Oscar Academy Award, and he gets the like it just the officiating in the NFL has been poor. We know this. But man, you look at some of these games, like you said, you go back to that Miami game, that was Hockey Lee's crew yesterday. I'm sorry, man. You got to start rating and penalizing these guys because it absolutely, and it's not even from a betting standpoint because people are going to get screwed left and right. You still got to play the game and overcome it. It absolutely has taken center stage. It really has. And the problem is, and I say it every year, and I beat the drum, and everyone always kills me, and they're like, stop complaining about it, but it always happens. There's going to be a play in the playoffs or in the Super Bowl that your team gets screwed at. Do not come back now after the fact and start bitching and complaining because you're accepting it now when it goes your way. But when it goes against you, all of a sudden arms are in there. I mean, it's that game was so poorly officiated. But bottom line is this: you can dig the hole, you can put down the friggin' lime, and you can put the friggin' Eagles' cold body in the hole, and yet you still can't bury them. It's
It was
just
crazy.
it's amazing to me. I can't stand the head coach. I think he's a clown. But be that as it may, there's something to be said that this team never, it pains me to say it, but I have to be fair and honest. They never waver. They're beyond resilient. They never panic. They never get rattled. Buffalo should have been up by 20, 17 in that game. And we were all texting me and my buddies back and forth during the game. You just knew. You just knew. I mean, Jake Elliott, I mean, my goodness, that guy's got friggin' balls on him. It's ridiculous. And it's so funny because I saw our guy, Johnny Mack, tweet out, he made his bones when he had that field goal against the Giants. Yeah, because the friggin' timekeeper in Lincoln Financial gave the friggin' Eagles an extra second. But I'm not pissed off about that. But for him to go and just drill that kick, I mean, ice water in his friggin' veins. Once that game went into overtime and Allen missed a receiver or the receiver ran the wrong route, you just knew that the Eagles were going to win it. And let me just add this. Can we put to rest this notion that Jalen Hurts is not a clutch quarterback? Like Jalen Hurts is a great friggin' quarterback. And he might not look the part, but he sounds the part, he acts the part, and he plays the part. I mean, I'll take this kid any day of the week. I mean, right now, I have him as NFL MVP. Did not light it up early in that game, but when he needed to make the plays, he made the plays, the late touchdown, the overtime, the scrambles, his legs, his throw. I mean, I can't say anything more about Jalen Hurts, and I think he really needs to get the national attention that he's earned and deserves because I have this kid right now, I would say top 2-3 quarterbacks in the NFL.
Yeah, Q. And this was a tremendous game, and it was the conditions were terrible. It was raining out there, and most quarterbacks were wilt. You saw that Monday night where the Eagles were playing Kansas City. It was a sloppy game because of the field and the conditions, but they overcame it, and particularly Hurts, who you talked about. What a game for him! 5 combined touchdowns in this game. Never gets too low, never gets too
Nope.
high in a game. And Q, as you said, the big thing with this Eagles team is you cannot underestimate the resiliency. They have slow starts, but they don't care. Hurts is now 4-0 in games where he's trailed by 10 points or more this season. So they come out and they make adjustments and then they get it done. He only had 33 yards passing in the
I
first
know.
half.
I
And
know.
you're like, oh man, they're being dominant. It's 17-7. And much like KC game, I didn't crunch all the stats, but I know the numbers are going to say, wow, they're just lopsided in the other team's direction. But the Eagles, as you said, who cares about the stats? Who cares about anything else? They get the W and they find ways to win. And in particularly, Bass misses the one was blocked by Carter,
That's
and
right.
you had the other one that was just a flat out miss on I think it was like 40 yards or less that he missed.
Yeah.
He needed that one. And but Elliott, he had no fear and he drilled that kick. He put it in the corner pocket.
59-yard
And
field goal.
and as
59
you
yard
said,
field.
Q, after that was done, you're like,
That's
we know
it.
who's winning the game.
It-
And then to make it worse, Q, there were 20 seconds left on the clock. Sean McDermott has one timeout,
Yes.
20
Thank
seconds,
you. Thank
and
you.
he kneels on the ball. He didn't
So,
even try. Josh Allen was playing awesome in that game.
yeah, so let's by the way, I'm so happy you brought that up because here's my question. They burned no one's I haven't heard anyone talk about this.
Yeah,
They burned a timeout
that
to
too. Yeah.
ice Elliott on a game tying field goal, not a game winning field goal. I'm not burning a timeout. Then, with 20 seconds left, you don't even let your quarterback, who, aside from the bad pick and the miscommunication late, which again, that would have made all the difference, they win the game, played an outstanding game in those conditions. You don't even allow him to throw the football. I think they were so rattled after that kick went through that they were like, if something bad can go wrong right now, we're not going to take that shot. But no one's talking about burning that timeout where you have 20 seconds and two timeouts when all you really need, you're going to guarantee to get three plays. Guaranteed to get three
Right.
plays. If he
And
doesn't get.
what did you and I just talk about? Who's making mistakes out there the most? One of those officials on a deep pass
Oh,
is
they're going to
bound to
throw the
call pass
flag.
interference. Yes.
100%.
And it's going
100%.
to stop the clock and you have the chance for the game winner. But McDermott, that's what we've always said. Bad teams find a way to lose, and that's what the Bills are at this point. They've been a huge disappointment. These close games, they're not getting it done. And I've always been a strong McDermott fan, but the right buttons are not being pushed for the Buffalo Bills at this time. And this is another team that
He's
we
gone.
talk about coaches on hot seat. Sean McDermott got an extension going into this season. He's still on the hot seat
No.
because they should have won that game flat out. I know Eagles fans are not going to be happy me saying it,
Oh,
but
that's a fact.
the
The
Bills,
smart Eagle, Lloyd,
yeah,
listen. The smart Eagles fan knows they got that game gift wrapped. You celebrated. It was a hell of a game. You can go back and watch it 1,000 times. It was a fun game as a fan to watch, but they know that game was gift wrapped to them. Horrible officiating. Buffalo can't get out of their own way. And it shows you how great of a team the Eagles are. So what you're saying is accurate. It's not accurate. But to your point, you look at what Allen did yesterday, 339, couple touchdowns. By the way, I think got sacked once, crushing them with their legs. They went away from the ground game as well. And they averaged $173 yesterday
yeah, they
on the
were
ground. They were
dominating.
averaging
Everybody
4.3
said
yards
you
a
couldn't run
carry.
the ball, and they were.
Yeah.
They were. Everybody, this Eagles the defense. Yeah, everybody may say, okay, it's Fletcher Cox going out with that groin injury or something, but the Bills had a plan, and they were hitting on it. Their new offense coordinator wanted to be physical with the Eagles, and that's what they were doing.
Eagles secondary worries me though. The Eagles secondary, you can throw on them.
That's what, and you and I talked about going into the season. You were like, Lloyd, what do you see with this team? What's going to keep them from going far deep in the playoffs? And that's what I see. That the middle of the field, in particular, you have Cunningham, who's a thumper type linebacker. Morrow is not a coverage linebacker either. Teams can get across the field on them, and then Byard, he makes a couple flash plays here and there, but he's 31 at this point in his career. And then those two corners, Q. I think their resume is bigger than their play on the field at this point.
Of late.
Bradbury from the Giants,
Yep.
and then Slay's looking like the guy that Dan Campbell said couldn't play anymore.
It's a really good point, and I want to illustrate it for a moment because, again, late in the game, take a shot down the field. These guys don't turn around, look for the football. Guess what? We're throwing a flag. They've been constantly picked on. You can go back to the Miami game, you go back to the Dallas game, you go back to the Kansas City game yesterday, Sunday against Buffalo. Now, I'll give them credit because the offensive coordinator turned around. Let me make adjustments coming out of the half. You got to run DeAndre Swift. He's got to be able to get 20, 25 plus touches. I mean, that's just, he had 14, Hurts had 14. Buffalo had the breakdowns. I didn't like that they went soft with the coverage late in the game.
Yes, I kept
Yeah.
saying they're just letting them kind of boom, boom, boom down the field. And they were luckily it ended up in a field goal attempt. But the way the Eagles were getting that soft coverage, they could have got that game-winning touchdown before regulation.
You're talking the Cook drop and 2 missed field goals. It's 13 points. I mean, that.
And you can't make mistakes, And
No.
it's like MVS in the Chiefs game against the Eagles. The ball is bouncing their way at this time, and we've seen this a lot in the National Football League.
Yeah.
Some teams they just find a way to win, but as you said, Q, you know they may have to go on the road in the playoffs. We'll see how everything shakes out, and it may not be angels in the outfield like sometimes happens.
Listen, they beat Kansas City, they beat Buffalo. I think those were games that people said maybe 0-2, at least a split. They're 10-1. There's something to be said about that. You have to acknowledge it. 10-1, best record in football. Jalen Hurts, front runner right now for MVP. I think the odds now he surpassed Patrick Mahomes. You look at the MVP and it's all quarterback, right? Hurts, Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, Prescott. Lawrence is there. Goff is right around there. I'm thinking who I might be missing. But in any event, it's going to be a hell of a game. 425 window against San Francisco. We'll talk about it later in the week. The Ravens got the win against the Chargers. I feel bad for Herbert because I think he's a very good quarterback. I wanted the Giants to draft him. I loved him in college. I just think that franchise is fundamentally broke. And there's no reason to keep this head coach. He looks like, sometimes when you go to a restaurant and they might have like a new waiter in training. So he's got his notes and he's reading off the specials. And then, he's got to double check and he's got to, the pasta, you're going to get the chicken parm and the cutlet with that. And, and he's like, when I look at Staley, that's what I think of. I think of yeah.
Yes. And Q, he gets the McVay stamp of approval, but he's just not head coach material. And we talk about this over and over again. This team, I think they're now 0-8 the last couple of years in games where it's 3 points or less, and it's all his defense. His defense cannot stop anybody. And the Ravens, they had a sloppy effort. They were not even playing that great in this game. So the game was there to be had, and his team just couldn't get it done. So he's another one. And then you start looking at, Herbert, is he the modern day Archie Manning, a guy who goes to a great college player, goes to the team, and they just can't get out of his way. Now we'll see if the Spanos family, who they're known to be kind of cheap, if they make the right decision to bring in the right coach for them, because they're on a coaching carousel out there as well with the Chargers. We know the Chargers really haven't had a home since they left San Diego, and the investment of the ownership group is really not there. But they have a talent in Herbert, and if you have a quarterback, you can start with that building block right there.
100%. Bears travel to Minnesota. Josh Dobbs and the Vikes laying 3 tonight, Monday Night Football. The Bears, that's another team that probably is going to be in the market for a new head coach, might be in the market for a new quarterback. And who knows what's going to go on with the Vikings too, right? I mean, they had that nice little run. They lost to Denver. Dobbs kind of came back down to earth. Kirk Cousins is a free agent. Dobbs going to be a free agent. They've got question marks in that regard. I do like Minnesota tonight. Again, when I look at a game like this, I just, they're playing these tight
Mm-hmm.
games, and I'll take, a team that's been there before, Minnesota. We saw this last year with them, as opposed to a team like the Bears. I mean, would I lay it? Sure, I laid the 3. I'd even probably take Minnesota on the money line, but I like the Vikings tonight on Monday Night Football.
Yeah, I agree with you. They're a home team, and they're desperate. They're right in this playoff mix. The Seattle Seahawks kind of took a step down, so they have a chance to kind of keep pace, keep that lead that they have for that sixth playoff spot. And guys like Daniel Hunter, who's playing very well, I think he's going to make a game changer play. Because Fields, yes, he's come back and he's able to make plays, but he also makes mistakes. So Dobbs is going to be efficient. The key thing to me, Q, is can they get Madison going in that running game? The Vikings, that's been their Achilles heel because Jefferson's probably not going to play in this game, but I think Dobbs just enough for them to keep winning. And Minnesota's schedule's favorable. They have their bye after this, and then they are at Vegas, at Cincinnati, big games against Detroit
Yep.
in week 16 and week 18. So that's going to be interesting down the pike.
All right, we'll recap that game later on in the week when we start to preview weekend action. Some good games starting to separate themselves. Lloyd Vance kind enough to join us on a Monday edition of BYP from our good friends over at Play It Again Sports. Check them out on X at Lloyd Vance. Also, Lloyd Vance's Insider Football 1029 The Game, Broad Street South. That is a Monday or Tuesday edition.
We will be taping it Monday evening, 8 p.m. and it'll be me and just my usual guests, and we're just going to go through the full slate. We're going to talk about probably go heavy on that Eagles game and the Bills game. That was a great game, and Q, I'll give it away. My game ball winner is Jalen Hurts because, as you said, he had a performance for the ages, and he's the MVP front runner. 5 combined touchdowns. He is playing extremely well.
Yeah, I didn't think that was going to be. I mean, I'm trying to think who else could have gone to. You look at that second half, third quarter, fourth quarter, the scramble, the play that he made late in the game for the throw in the back of the end zone. I'm okay with him with the game ball. I will say, though, I'm going to take a stab at the Lackey, even though we still have Monday Night Football tonight.
Right.
Man, I mean, can you give it to the referees? No, probably not. Who is the Lackey?
I'm still deciding, but I think it may be one of these head coaches whose team
That's what I
they're
was
just so
thinking.
scared. And it's systemic on some of these teams, and it starts at the top, and they're just not getting it done. So I think it's going to be one of these head coaches that's not getting the job done.
All
So
right, so we'll
I'll
we'll get
tweet it
that
down.
little nugget on social as well. All right, brother. Always appreciate you jumping on board. We'll check you out tonight on 1029 The Game, Broad Street South with Lloyd Vance's Insider Football. We'll do it again later in the week. Preview all the games. Appreciate you.
All right, Q. Thanks for having me on.